lust over them, Goff. Right. Oh yeah, I was I phoned I was gonna sign up to get a brand new Google Chromebook, right? And it's got a good like camera for Zoom, and and it was good for editing my book stuff. And I thought that's going to be a good idea, right? So anyway, I've got an old Google Chromebook. When I say an old Google Chromebook, it's about 2 years old, and there's got a fault on most of these Chromebooks, that the charger drive, which is called a C drive, it fails. Anyway, I phoned up the computer place and I said, "Oh, can you repair this?" He said, "No, they're disposable computers now." I said, "Hang on a minute. Can't I just get the part?" And he said, "No, it's all in one thing, right? The computers are meant to be disposable. There's the hard drive in the computer you're not supposed to use, because everything's supposed to go up in the cloud. And if you've got anything stored on the computer, you can forget it, right?" So this is how they're designing computers now. They're designing computers to be disposable and not to be repaired. And I was actually quite shocked, because I've got a Google Chromebook, and I thought, right, it's going to be a matter of just changing the charger port on it. And he says, "No, it's built in. Everything's built in." He said, "You need to chuck it in the bin."
Oh,
And I just thought,
oh.
well, this £250 computer. I go, "Yeah, chuck it in the bin. You can't repair it. Just chuck it out."
Mm.
So I thought, do I invest money in something that's a lot better than this, but is exactly the same specifications? And if that goes wrong, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
I think we're all in that situation, because of course it's Windows 11 now, isn't it? I mean, I bet that's gone out the window, but I'm running
yeah,
on
it
Windows
has
8.
gone out the window, love, quite some time ago. No, this is a different operational system. This is a Google Chromebook, right? So this
Oh
is all
yeah,
done via Google, and it's their
I don't
software,
work.
and it's
I don't,
Samsung software. It's not Microsoft, it's Samsung, right? So basically, with Google Chrome, right? Because I've got a Samsung phone, all the data on my phone, or all the data on my laptop, is immediately on my phone. So, and any Samsung device that's linked to my phone number, right, is saved in the cloud.
yeah,
So
it's a nuisance.
And the
It's a
one in the
nuisance
CIA officers as well.
because it's the same with Microsoft. Bing, you know, I haven't got control of my own. I stay away from Chrome. I try and stay away from it because it just complicates my computer and my phone and everything. I think I'm going to go back to having a phone that's just for telephoning and
yeah,
texting, you
yeah,
know.
I agree, Anne. I agree, Anne. Right, on that note, other than don't whatever you see, be quiet tonight. Don't mention the CIA, right? Or KLF. Anything from you, Anne?
Oh, nothing archaeological. It's been a funny old week, really. Been watching a lot of just travel programs, traveling the world, with Michael Portillo.
Oh, he's lovely, Michael Portillo.
Yeah,
He's the ideal man.
yeah.
Um, anything from you, Pat?
No, afraid not. Just hanging in there.
We don't often hear from Michael Woods anymore, do we? Um,
Oh,
Oh,
the the the
no.
the leather clad historian that Anne saw live once.
I did.
Right,
I did. He had a
you
pink
did.
scarf on or pink jumper.
Yeah, well, let's just move on from that,
Yeah.
Anne. I had this butch image of him. Now you've ruined it. Right, Henry.
it's been a bit of a quiet week. Got something
Somebody
on
else said that. Yeah.
just Malta. They believe hunter-gatherers got there 1,000 years before the farmers. They found cave evidence of their activities.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, somebody else mentioned that.
And
Yeah, somebody else. Yeah.
Australia. There's been a lot on about Australia as well.
Hang
Sorry,
on, that's
Henry.
nowhere near Malta. Hang on a minute.
Even I know that.
Australia, that's another continent, love.
No, Malta's very important.
Malta's not in Australia.
It's in the
No,
Mediterranean.
well, I've been watching £10 Poms, I love
I
it.
don't know what you've been watching, Anne, right? But you need to have a geography lesson here. It's nowhere near Australia.
No, but it was the thought of all those very ancient, the ancient Aborigines and,
Yeah,
Aboriginal
in Malta.
people.
Yeah, lovely.
And it's just being more and more acknowledged now because there's so much prejudice. Oh, what?
Anyway, they caught the car ferry
Jeff,
1,000 years ago.
Look at him.
But hang on a minute, Anne. Henry, make sense of this. What was that?
They arrived about 8,500 years ago.
What, in Australia or Malta?
Malta.
Malta.
Yeah,
We're
thank God
talking-
for that.
Yeah, Malta we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that long ago, really.
No, it's not. It's not. No, it's only down the road. Australia is. It's just over the down the road, like Oh
Near
my
Barry.
God. Yeah, by Barry. Somebody had a go at me today. They said the reason why the rugby team is doing so bad is that 99% of the players are from Barry. I said, well, it's not my fault, but that you're from Barry. Oh, sod it, Anyway, Goff.
No news.
I think Anne's on top form tonight, Goff. I thought I'd tell you.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh,
Google Chrome.
my God.
Yeah, Google Chrome. Yeah.
I'm
And we got
sorry,
on
I
to.
just don't like Google Chrome. It's
Yeah,
Oh,
Anne, we get it.
You know, yeah.
Anne, we know it. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Get over it. It's all right. Yes, it's. Oh my God. Right. Okay.
all I
okay.
want is one browser.
I don't know.
I don't want all these different browsers.
Yeah, Anne. All right. It's fine. It's fine. I get it. I know. Right. Okay. So tonight we're going to look at Cartimandua, and it's last night it worked so well that I managed to go all the way up to 20-10, right? Even though we started quite on time around, just got about 8 minutes past 7. So you can imagine. I don't want to do it that long tonight. I really don't.
No.
But I must have put a lot into it last night. So hopefully we'll probably carve a little bit away from that. But when and there were actually 10 of us online last night, so it was great. So when I mention the name Cartimandua, does anyone know the name?
No,
Cartimandua.
Yeah.
Yeah.
can't spell it.
You keep saying it all the time.
In Australia.
No.
Right, let's just get on to
Iron
it.
Age. It was sort of one of the tribes of Britain.
No, it was a woman.
Oh. All right.
Yeah, I just thought I'd tell you, like, it's just like it was a woman,
She
right?
was in the north, wasn't she?
Yeah, well, she was up the north. She was.
She was married to what's his name now?
Up north.
The king.
Go on.
One of the
What?
tribes. What was his name?
Venetius.
Then she jobbed him to the Romans.
Yeah, Venetius. Oh, you're thinking about, no, she wasn't married to Caraticus, but she dobbed Caraticus in.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the only
blind date last night.
Yeah. Yeah. It was in Australia, wasn't it?
No.
On Google Chrome.
Right. Okay. If nobody's ever heard of Cartimandua, right, there she is. Right, there she is. And there is Caraticus on the left. And that is the Roman governor, right? And we're just painting the scene. There's the back of a check. And there it is. There is spelled Cartimandua, Queen of the Brigantes. She wore the trousers. Yeah, yeah, she was basically the woman in charge. And what we do this in two parts today. So we just like the sort of general text, and then we look at what this author thinks of her, Jill Armitage. Now, there she is again. That's Anne on a good day. The point is with Cartimandua, everybody thinks about Boadicea, right? And Cartimandua is the archetypal figure for the Britannia coin, right? Cartimandua is the archetypal Queen Elizabeth I, right? And lots of what we know about Cartimandua was actually being postulated in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. But when we approach Cartimandua and the way she reacted to the Roman world coming to take control of Britain, you might gel to her, or you might think that she's an anti-hero. And lots of things that I do talk about tonight are based around the fact that if Cartimandua didn't do this or she did this, would things have happened this way, right? And to be honest with you, I've come to very much the conclusion before we even look at Cartimandua and Boudica and the original Roman invasion of Britain, right? I've come to the long-ending conclusion that the history of Britain would not have been changed much if the Romans had not invaded, right? And that is a very important point. And when we think about the revolt of Boudicca, Boadicea Bouthig, right, in 61 AD, and that would be a revolt. If we hang on a minute, not that there, that would be a revolt that consumed all this part of the country, right? And this is the territory of Cartimandua. In fact, Cartimandua and Boadicea were contemporary. Now, Cartimandua was still in control of this territory while Boadicea's rebellion was ensuing, right? And there's one difference between Boadicea and Cartimandua. Boadicea was anti-Roman, Cartimandua was pro-Roman. Now, if Boadicea had defeated the Romans, she would have then faced off against Cartimandua. There would have been a mud fight between two red-headed women, right? Both having a temper, and both of them very much for their people. And the point to be said at the top here is that Cartimandua of the Brigantes protected her people by kowtowing to the Romans. Boadicea was anti-Roman, and that's the way she protected her people. So there's two different, very different figures that come into all this, and we know a lot about Cartimandua, not by writers like Jill Armitage, but by the writings of Tacitus, interesting writings of Tacitus. And there's that figure there that Goff mentioned. Cartimandua was married to Venetius. Now, it's interesting for me to start at the top here with this little extract. The name Venetius, who was a husband up until AD 51, she then took a lover called Velicatus. Now, there's one thing that we should be very careful at the top here is this date and this date, which is not written. And the one thing I would say is it's very likely that Cartimandua was reigning as a queen as early as AD 43. And she kept the kingdom of the Brigantes under her thumb up until AD 69, where she lost control of her kingdom. And then we don't know what happened to her after AD 69. One of the things is that Cartimandua wore the trousers, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean it that Britain, as we've already established, in the Iron Age, was a matriarchal society, controlled and underpinned by women, whereas the Roman Empire was a patriarchal society. So that Britain was matriarchal and Rome was patriarchal, where men were in the ascendancy, not the descendancy. And if you want to understand the difference between an Iron Age woman and a Roman woman, the Iron Age woman in Britain was allowed to display herself. She was allowed to display her hair. If an illustration was done with jewelry, it would be displayed, right? Iron Age women in Britain could display their gold, their silver, their brooches. In the Roman world, they had to cover them up. And I realized something very odd last night. Very, very, very odd. That, and I've got to be very careful what I say. It's almost as if in extreme Islamic countries, the way Islamic countries treat their women is exactly the same way that the Roman Empire treated their women. Women in the Roman Empire, if they were aristocracy, they had to keep covered up. Any gold or any silver had to be covered up underneath their garments. The beauty of a Roman woman had to be considered not to be displayed externally. And you can see that with elements of the extreme Islamic faith that is available in some countries. But whereas if you want to make a comparison with today's times, Western women are quite free to display themselves. And in fact, in a way, that's how Iron Age women in Britain and Germany and Gaul, before the Romans conquered it, displayed themselves. They were able to be people. Right. So what we're going to do, I've already put quite a bit into it, trying to explain where we are. So let's try and fathom a little bit more of this wonderful figure from history. And let's get on with my notes. Here we go. Now, Cartimandua. Cartimandua, from this illustration, and this was actually drawn in the 1800s, this is described as Caraticus, king of the Silures, delivered up to Ostorius. The man on the right sat down, the Roman general, with Cartimandua in the middle, queen of the Brigantes. Now, there's several ways of spelling Cartimandua, and one way is that way. Or you could spell it with an S after the I before the M, which it would be Cartimandua. Now, we do believe that the name Cartimandua is actually a name not just written down by the Romans, but a name that was probably more akin to what she called herself. It's quite a strange name, actually. And when I say it's quite a strange name, the direct translation of Cartimandua is basically woman who was as strong as a horse, or woman who was what's the other translation? Woman who was forthright and very powerful like a horse, which is quite a weird translation. So her reign was quite an interesting reign, and she very much controlled probably the best part of in a geographical sense, probably about a sixth to a fifth of the area of modern day England, which doesn't sound like a big area, but actually it is. You know, all that chunky territory up the north, you know. And some people actually have a map that it contains all of that there. Carrick Fell and all the rest of it, all that stuff on the left is in Cumbria. And also likely they conquered the Perusii as well. However, with all of this being said, And somebody mentioned this last night. They said, look, if we hadn't have had the writings of the Roman historian Tacitus, we'd know very, very little about her. But I'm not really sure that that's the case. And the reason why I'm not sure that that's the case is I'll give you a little bit of an analogy. And the analogy is quite simple. All those little red dots, right? All those little red dots within the territory of the Brigantes are actually hill forts, right? And ones that we know about, yeah. And the big ones like Stanwick and Barwick are big population centres like Geropolis in the south or Caliva Atrapatum. Now, I got to get you into the mindset. So if Tacitus hadn't written about Cartimandua and hadn't written about Venetius, right? We would have some idea that somebody powerful existed in the area of the Brigantes, right? And the way I'm talking about that is that the Romans didn't take control of this territory until after AD 69, right? Into AD 70s, AD 71, AD 72, and thereabouts, right? And what we'd see in the archaeology was up until AD 69, AD 70, right? This whole area is still controlled by the Brigantes or still controlled by the native people. And we would be asking, why is that? Why is this territory not being conquered when East Anglia, and we find the evidence of Boudica and a rebellion, and we've got a big thick layer in St. Albans, Verulamium. We've got a big thick layer of destruction around 60 AD in Londinium, and we've got the same in Colchester at Cartimandua. But in the north, at the same time, nothing's happening. And so if the Roman historians hadn't written down the name Cartimandua, we'd have an idea that there was somebody very powerful reigning in the north that the Romans didn't mind and the Romans didn't object to. And somebody mentioned something very powerful last night, right? Which we didn't discuss until the very end, right? And I'm going to mention this now. Today, the area of the Brigantes, and if we go with coast to coast, right, which is what the Roman writer Ptolemy mentioned in the 100s, right, this big territory up north, right. Most of what we know about Cartimandua and Brigantes was written by Tacitus after Cartimandua had been dethroned and taken out of control of the Brigantes in 1869. But the landscape of this area of northern England was fairly richer agriculturally than it is today, right? So it would have been an ideal territory for the Romans to have conquered quite early on, but they didn't. And therefore, if we didn't have the name Cartimandua, we'd be thinking, why is that? So in other words, the Romans respected the Brigantes enough to basically allow them to remain in control of their territory. When in fact it was it would be quite a useful area to have controlled. And the point that somebody mentioned last night, right? Why were the Romans really into East Anglia when? Hang on a minute. Let's just get my ink. When in fact all of this area here. Hang on, if we can get this blue. If you follow my blue dot, all of that area there was actually underwater, right? In fact, a third of the territory that is land now, that is popularly known to have been controlled by the Iceni, was actually underwater at the time of the Roman invasion of Britain. So therefore, a third of East Anglia was underwater. So you can't plant crops. So why did they let the people Cartimandua get away with what she did for such a long time? And there's another point that we made last night, which was quite powerful, right? Which was quite powerful. We had two people last night, because obviously there was more people last night. There was two of the ladies last night, because when I was talking about Cartimandua and Boudica, I basically I made the mistake of putting a question in the wrong way. I said, well, um, why was Boudica really peed off with the Romans? And then somebody said that's because her daughters were raped. Um, and then I basically said, well, um, they may have been defiled, but we're not really sure they were raped. Anyway, we went into that, but the argument was like, well, yeah, but they were still. If you got two daughters anyway, we went down that, and so yeah, I understand what you're saying, right? Um, but right, the Romans treated Boudica really badly anyway, right? But they treated Cartimandua, another Iron Age queen, with complete respect, right? And why is that important? I've already explained why it's important. The Romans didn't see the Romans didn't respect women. They didn't give women. There were very few women that had any power in the Roman world, particularly around this time, AD 43. The only women that we had great power were like people like Agrippina, were people Agrippina's wife, Claudius's wife was Agrippina, and the only women that had any real power were the empresses, right? Who were the mothers of the emperors, right? They were usually kingmakers and so on, right? And you note as well that if you go through the chronology of Roman emperors, right, you find empresses, but you don't find women as emperors reigning by themselves, right? And the issue is why did they respect this woman? Why? They don't need to. It's not really in their book to respect this woman. So
You
to
mean
give
the
you a little bit,
Romans?
eh?
Do you mean the Romans?
Is that what I just said? Yeah.
They
It wasn't.
respected.
It wasn't in the book for the Romans to respect this
No.
woman, but they did. But they did
Yeah.
respect her. This
Okay.
is the confusing thing. This is the thing that doesn't make sense. Why
Yeah.
did they treat Boudicca so appallingly
Mm.
and treat this woman with massive respect? If you want to hold your horses there a minute, Anne, right? Because I might be able to give you a little bit of information that might hold us to understand what's going on between these two, right? Now, the other thing with Boudicca is that, and Cartimandua, is that Boudicca is the one who's respected in history, and hardly anyone knows who Cartimandua is. So if I went down the street and said to 100 people, have you ever heard of Boudicca? Right? It's probably likely that 80% of people would say, of course I have, right? We did her in school. It'd probably be quite higher than that, right? If I said, have you ever heard of Cartimandua? It'd probably be in the lower 10 or 20 people out of the 100, right? Now, why is that? This is the big question. Why is this? I personally am on the side of Cartimandua because I believe that she looked the best way she could look after her people was to be friendly to Rome. However, Boudicca was friendly to Rome to begin with as well. On the death of Prasutagus, this is what led to the rebellion around 60 years AD. When Prasutagus died, who was the wife of Boudicca, in Prasutagus's will, Prasutagus said to Rome, "You're going to have half of my kingdom, and my wife has the other half." Right? And the Romans, because there were wills, there were actually written wills. We know these documents existed because we found one or two in the muds of London. So we know that there were wills and land charters and stuff because they exist because we found them, right? Obviously not this one. And Rome just went in and said, right, we don't recognize your authority, woman, and we're going to take the territory of the Iceni off you, right? However, now this is the next point, right? This is really key to understanding this because at the end of this, it makes no sense. Why they treated one way and one the other when they didn't really respect women, right? Now, to try and understand this, it's probably best to have a pen with you, right, to write this down, right? Now, I initially said that the date, right, is that the date is approximately Cartimandua probably started her reign here, right? AD 43. Now, this here is a slightly different date, right? Because that refers to the reign of Cartimandua reigning by herself. Because around 43 AD, it's very likely that Cartimandua reigned with her husband, Venetius. At some stage, she decided, and there's more information that comes out anyway as I present this tonight. She decided to have an affair with Velicatus. So she divorced her husband, Venetius, in the year AD 51. So she wanted to remain friends with Venetius, but she now reigned with Velicatus as basically, the queen of the Brigantes, right? And the point is that she was the one who called the shots. She's the one who decided that she was going to divorce Venetius, right? Venetius didn't have a say in it. I want to divorce you. I'm a woman. I'm in control. I'm an Iron Age woman, right? Women have got more rights than the men in Britain, right? I am the one who's going to have the divorce. And her people didn't like this, right? But she's a woman. She's the one in charge. She's an Iron Age woman. The people went along with it, right? So then she married Velicatus. As this is all developing over the course of nearly of around 18 years, Venetius is waiting to try and take control of the kingdom at any opportunity. But the Romans support the reign of the likes of Cartimandua, right? So what's happening? What's happening is that Cartimandua is basically very much in charge of the territories of Brigantes, but with constant rebellions with Venetius. But she's the one in charge, and she's supported by the Romans to remain in charge. Right now, this is the point. Shouldn't it have been the case when she divorced Venetius that the Romans came in and took over the Brigantes territory because they didn't want a woman in charge? The woman has kicked the man out. The woman is, but the Romans didn't do that. They respected and they supported the reign of Cartimandua. It does not make any sense why they treated one woman one way and another woman another way. They treated Boudica in a despicable way. Let's say that the Romans did rape her daughters, and that is heinous. That's absolutely terrible, right? That's the worst thing that a parent could even imagine going on with their children. However, right, the Romans did not treat Cartimandua didn't treat her in any negative way at all, right? And she reigned with Roman support until the year of the four emperors, which is AD 69, when Rome started to lose control of some of its provinces for a little while, right? And the Roman army could no longer support the likes of Cartimandua, and therefore Venetius then decided to war against Rome and take control of the territories of the Brigantes, and that's another history. Now, one of the things that I said last night, which was quite fitting, right? And I thought this was brilliant, right? That if we go to again, let's have another image of her, right? Now, Cartimandua did the reverse of what happened in 1066, which is going to happen 1,000 years later or so, right? Now, well, actually, more or less 1,000 years later, with a few years between, right? On the 14th of October 1066, King Harold faces off King William after Harold had defeated the Vikings up at Stamford Bridge, right? Battle of Hastings, it didn't go well because Harold's army was absolutely exhausted, and he lost the Battle of Hastings, right? Now, this is very important. This is why looking at history, there's lessons. Yeah. So what happened was that the that the Northern Lords of England, right, were not happy with King William invading, but they didn't like Harold, so they were basically okay. You know, they were all right, right? But when King William started to go north, the northern barons said, "We're not going to have this. We're gonna fight you, William. You know, we're going to fight you. We're not going to have this, right?" And it's called the Harrying of the North. Villages, towns are burnt, land is destroyed, cattle, sheep put to the sword, and in fact, the North is harried so much after 1066 that there are big chunks of it that ain't even mentioned in the Doomsday Book because there's nobody living there, right? Cartimandua did the reverse. He kowtowed to the Romans to preserve her people's territory. And she did such a good job that she was able to keep her territory intact from AD 43 all the way through to AD 69. It's something that Boudicca didn't do. So I'm going to say it. In my book, Boudicca is a failure. Cartimandua isn't. But I'm sure lots of people would disagree, and they would disagree with that. And this event here is very, very important. Was it Goff or one of you said about this, you know, this other figure, Caraticus on the left. Now, this is really, really important. Around AD 51, Caraticus, right, fled to Cartimandua and said to Cartimandua, "Look, babe, right, I need a bit of help." And Cartimandua said, "I'm not helping you." And that's probably what led to the divorce between Venetius and Cartimandua in the first place. Because Cartimandua said to Venetius, probably said to Cartimandua, but at this point she didn't like him anyway because she was having an affair with Velicatus. It was actually a lowly soldier, right? And the point is with all of this is Venetius said, "Look, it's Caraticus, right? We need to help him, and by helping him, it would mean a war against Rome." And Cartimandua said, "No, we're not fighting Rome," and that's what saved her people. It meant that her people didn't rebel at the same time as the Boudica revolt, right, in AD 61 after the death of Prestigius. Now, there's to be honest with you, I've hardly looked at my notes tonight, right? Because this is such an intriguing topic, right? Now, it's stored up in my little grey cells, right? But the point is, what we've got is I want to the other reason why I'm doing Cartimandua tonight is I feel there's a lot more to her that I'm bringing out tonight as well. Because everyone knows about Boudicca, you know, red hair, you know, what happened to her daughters, set light to those cities. She ended up getting defeated in battle, end of her people being enslaved, her territory being burnt, blah blah blah, right? Now let me talk about a few scenarios, right? And it's basically the same as that I would say with the Second World War, right? Whether any of these scenarios happened or not would have made no difference to the future, right? It's the same as the Second World War, right? By Germany invading Poland in the Second World War, right? It was Germany could not have won the war. That's it. I'll have an argument till they go blue, right? Germany was never going to win the Second World War. There's no scenario that I've ever seen that Germany could have won the Second World War, right? It's the same as what I'm going to do now, right? With this, right? So if say for example, let's go to AD 61. Right, this is all AD 61. That's the date we're going to do. This rebellion is happening, right? Boudicca is defeated, and half of the Ninth Hispanic Legion, right? She set light to three major Roman cities: Camulum, Junum, Verulamium, Londinium, right? She's eventually defeated at Watling Street, right, which is maybe by there, I don't know. Nobody knows where it was. Anyway, the point is if we go with the other scenario, right? Say, for example, Boadicea, right, managed to defeat the Romans. And then she was going to have to fight Cartimandua, right? One of them would have won, whatever, but history would have been the same thing. We would still be here today. That would have been it. It would probably been easier for the Roman Empire for the Romans to have lost that. They could have concentrated on the continent, right? If, for example, the other thing about AD 61, Cartimandua and Boudica had fought together, they would have definitely defeated the Romans. There's no way that the Romans could have defeated Cartimandua and Boudica with their armies. There's no way. It's just not going to happen, right? Because what would have happened is that at this stage, Boadicea is actually heading towards the Second Augusta Legion, right, which is basically run away, right? The Ninth Hispanic Legion doesn't exist anymore, right? Coming away from North Wales is the Roman general Suetonius Paulinus, right? Now, if Cartimandua had been on the side of Boudica, they would have faced off the Roman army and defeated it, right? And therefore, the Second Augusta Legion would have been defeated by Boadicea. That would have happened, and that would have been the end of Roman rule in Britain. But it would have made no difference to the future of Britain in any way, shape, or form. We'd have still developed as a society. We'd have still traded with Rome. There would have been still 1066. Everything would have been the same thing. So I wanted to give you those scenarios, right? So therefore, hang on a minute, Carl, why are we even talking about Cartimandua? Because I think the story about Cartimandua is in essence the right story on how to deal with people. This is about people at the end of the day. This is not about great victories against Rome. This is how to treat your people. This is how to lead your people. This is to see your people in a peaceful state. And this is what this woman did. Whether this is the right image to show or not, I don't know, right? But again, Celtic queen, and there we go, Queen of the Brigantes. She came to power, as we know, whilst Rome was decidedly taking control of Britain after AD 43. And she was massively influential, a massively influential figure over Northern England. But her influence didn't extend any further than that. Boudica's did, right? Now, the thing is, now this is a really interesting point that we came to last night. Why do the Roman historians obsess over Boadicea? And why do only a few of the Roman historians write about Cartimandua? It's almost as if the Romans want us to know that Boadicea actually defeated a Roman army, right? And burnt some of its major cities. But they don't talk about the peace that they had with this wonderful leader, the Queen of the Brigantes. Now, she united the tribal peoples of the north. They surrendered their loyalty to Rome. Now, this is really, really important. And the next thing is also really, really important. It's all to do with this guy, Caraticus. Now, I struggle with Caraticus in my own head because 1 minute he's the leader of the Cativellani tribe in the centre of Britain, facing off against Claudius in AD 43, AD 44, and the next minute he's suddenly the leader of the Silures in South Wales. Well, two things: the Silures, by name as a tribal people, never existed. It's a name that the Romans gave to the people in South Wales. I'm not going to go into that. That's another lecture, and that's in my own book. You can read it yourself, right? This Caraticus was never the leader of the people in South Wales, or there were two Caraticuses. There was a Caraticus who was leader of the Catavalani, and there was another Caraticus in South Wales. And it was the Caraticus in South Wales that eventually ended up at Oswestry, and then via Oswestry all the way up through past Derbyshire, all the way into the area of the Brigantes. There may have been two Caraticuses. It may have been like a King Arthurian thing, right? There's more than one King Arthur in the 400s. There was probably certainly more than one person called Caraticus at the time of what was going on between the 40s and the 50s. So this woman Caraticus, this woman Cartimandua, is recorded as betraying this Celtic chieftain Caraticus. And the reason why we're using the word Celtic is that we're using Roman words, right? Because the Romans saw that these people were Celtic. Not that I'm saying they're Celtic in the Iron Age context. The Romans are saying these are Celtic people, right? It's again a classification. Everybody north of Greece is a Celt, right? And that's it. That's all we need to say about it, right? Caraticus fled to this woman, and probably her husband Venetius, but he didn't have a say in it, right? So she apparently offered him sanctuary, but then she handed him over to Rome. Now, if she had kept hold of Caraticus, right, and rebelled against Rome, her people would have just been wiped out. That's all. That's what would have happened. Stanwick, the city, would have been in their town, their little town at Stanwick. You know, that would have been in flames. It would have been a hell of a state. Northern England would have been a hell of a state. But she handed over Caraticus to Rome. Now, there's something very important to this. Let's just read this out, right? Let's just read out this little bit, right? And she was also recorded as having divorced her husband and then ended up with Velicatus, right? And this is the thing, you know, constantly Venetius is rebelling against his ex-wife, even though they were meant to be friends initially. Now the key point is this, right? And I need you to get this into your heads, right? This is the very, very important point. It's called the betrayal of Caraticus, right? Let's read this out and explain what this actually means. In AD 51, the British resistance leader Caraticus sought sanctuary with Cartimandua after being defeated by Ostorius Scapula in Wales, right? Ostorius Scapula apparently pushed Caraticus all the way over to Oswestry. Caraticus was defeated, blah, blah, blah. And Tacitus writes, the Roman historian Tacitus. Now, the Roman historian Tacitus at this time is basically a boy, right? So we didn't actually write down the story until coming into the 60s and the 70s, right? Now, but more like the 70s, actually. So here we go. Tacitus writes about Cartimandua. She had later strengthened her power when she was credited with having captured King Caraticus by treachery and so furnished an adornment for the triumph of Claudius Caesar. Now, quick thing. This isn't Julius Caesar. This is Claudius Caesar. The title Caesar was the title used for emperors. There were usually two Caesars in the empire, but this was Claudius Caesar. There was one emperor at that time, AD 51. You're Augustus Caesar if you're the overall emperor in Rome, but that's another lecture. And Tacitus writes, from this came her wealth and the wanton spirit which success breeds. Now, 1 minute he's not complimenting, the next minute he is blah, blah, blah. Now, this is very, very important. And what is very, very important is this. The Romans saw the ownership of Caraticus more important than the ownership of the territory of the Brigantes. It was more important to have a head, i.e. Caraticus, than it was to take over the territory of Cartimandua. And by giving up Caraticus, Cartimandua saved her people the death and destruction that would later be wrought 9 years later on the territory of the likes of Boudicca and Iceni. just we'll do this again, but basically, Caraticus was sent to Rome, and he was in chains, thrown at the feet of Emperor Claudius, and Claudius thought he was such a great guy that Caraticus was allowed to live, right? But again, it's the question. This Caraticus was so important that the Romans didn't need Cartimandua territory, and that's the basic honest of the story. But that's only part of the story. That's just me saying it. You might get another take, right? Now, around 100 years earlier, give or take a year or so, right, another leader was actually captured by Julius Caesar, and that figure was besieged at Elysee, north of Paris. It was a figure that we will all know, the figure of Vercingetorix. And this was 100 years earlier. And can you see what I did there? The emperor on the throne of Rome is like a doddery emperor, right? Claudius is got a bit of a stutter, right? So they said, right? Now, but whether that's true or not, we don't know. But he was cowering behind a curtain as his nephew Caligula was stabbed to death, right? And they said, "Oh, come on, Claudius, you can now be emperor." Yeah, that's fine. I just told you, giving you a bit of information. By Claudius capturing start again. By Claudius having captured Caraticus, this put Claudius up there amongst Julius Caesar. Nobody would have bloody cared if he had conquered the territory of the Brigantes. It's just neither here nor there. Nobody in Rome would have bloody cared about that. But they cared about him capturing Caraticus. This was a la route along le plan d'espoir. This was the most amazing thing he could have done, right? And this was to put Claudius up into the gods, right? And interesting enough, there was a temple constructed at Colchester that revered Claudius as a god, which would be eventually burnt down by Boudicca herself in AD 61. Full circle. 10 years after the capture of Caraticus. Although Cartimandua is first mentioned by Tacitus in AD 51, her rule over the Brigantes may already have been established as early as 43 AD, and it's likely as well. Now, this is a really odd thing to put across, but I'm going to do it. She may have been one of the 11 kings. Yeah, kings. There we go. Cartimandua, yes, she's a woman, but may have been classed as one of the 11 kings, right? Who Claudius's triumphal arch says surrendered without a fight. Basically, it said kings, the 11 kings of Britain. Well, it would have been included, the leader of the Brigantes. If not, she may have come to power after a revolt, sometime around AD 47, AD 48. And basically, she then had the support of Publius Ostorius Scapula, because she basically said, "Look, boys, look, Romans, I'm Cartimandua. Anyone who's rebelled against you, I am now going to be friends with you." And the Romans said, "Yeah, that's fine. That's okay, babe." But this was nothing to do with Caraticus yet, right? So this is all really interesting stuff. Now, this is again. Let's go to this image. I told you this would be bloody interesting. I'm loving it. So there she is. Now, this is really, there's a little bit of meat on the bones that I need to give you, right, for you to really get to grips with this. Being of illustrious birth, according to Tacitus, Cartimandua probably inherited her power, as she does not appear to have obtained it through marriage. So what we mean by that, she didn't marry a man to be queen over the Brigantes. It was the other way round. She was queen of the Brigantes, and then a man married her, and she was the one wearing the trousers. This is how they did things. in Iron Age Britain and Scandinavia. Women were the all-encompassing bodies of power within this world before Rome. She and her first husband, Venetius, husband with a little h, are described by Tacitus as loyal to Rome and defended by our arms. However, everything changes in AD 51 when Caraticus turns up. Well, that's really important. A reminder of a name as well. Here's another thing. So Cartimandua, as I said, to chase, to go forth, to be in the ascendancy, which is Cartis, pony, Mandua, pony. So basically, she's got the strength of a pony. She goes forward. She gets things done. Different ways of translating that. But that's her name, Cartimandua. And interestingly enough, I didn't say this last night, but this ties in with the horse thing again. Aponus, which is the Iron Age horse god. Aponus, pony. If that's Mandua, that's what this is about. So to basically say that you've got the power of a pony, right, or a horse, you've got great power indeed, right? You've got the power of our ancestors. At this stage, interestingly enough, at this stage, the chalk figure, probably at Westbury and definitely Uffington, and other chalk figures, which no longer exist because the other chalk figures in Wiltshire are mainly done from the late 17 and early 1800s. But the Uffington horse was already over 1,000 years old in her reign. Just think about that. It was 1,000 years old. And that is also a really important, powerful thing to actually say. So the meat on the bones is that the Romans had to deal with her. They weren't dealing with Venetius. She was the one. She was the be-all and end-all of everything. Now, again, lots written about this woman, and again with Jill Armitage, which we're going to go into. Now, if we want to sort of focus a little bit more, and I'm going to try and get these notes completed, right? Because if I can get these notes completed, then we're halfway through, and then we'll have a break. Right, so this is really interesting again. Cartimandua later divorced Venetius, keep saying that, in AD 51. She took basically their best man, their armor bearer, their general, a soldier, their third or fourth in command, and she then Velicatus became her right arm man, actually a right arm man, and that's when AD 51. Now, interesting enough, Cartimandua kept the brother of Venetius, her former husband, and several relatives of Venetius hostage. And even though she actually had hostages of Venetius, her former husband, he warred against Cartimandua, and he kept doing it. And basically, Cartimandua said, "Rome, can you help me?" And Rome obliged with the 9th Hispanic Legion, and probably the 6th Legion as well. But the 9th Legion, which was based at Lincoln, right, came to her defense. Cavalry and ala, which is cavalry, and infantry. So what we're talking about is that Cartimandua was kept in control of the province of the Brigantes by Aulus Didius Gallus, the Roman governor, in AD 57. What Venetius was trying to do, he was trying to seize control of the territory of the Brigantes and war against Rome. And Cartimandua knew that wasn't going to work. Not only did she want to keep a control of a kingdom, she knew that the answer lied with Rome. Now I don't know anything about this. I don't think you're going to find it, but if I'd like to have thought that if she actually had two girls, they wouldn't have been raped, right? Nothing would have happened to them, right? And again, the question is, why is that? Why is she treated this way, and Boudicca's treated another way? So basically, the Romans had basically sent an army to help, and basically this army would then protect the likes of Cartimandua all the way up until AD 69. And in fact, interestingly enough, the interesting point is that in the revolt of Boudicca in AD 61, the Ninth Legion, the Legion of the Ninth, was defending her territory against her ex-husband. They were assisting her. Cartimandua retained a throne thanks to prompt military support from Roman forces. Now, you know I like using metaphors, but I'll give another metaphor. I thought about this last night, and I know you want to say something, Anne, but we'll do this metaphor first, and then we'll read this out. I actually started to try and think: was this similar to what happened to Mussolini? Is Cartimandua similar to what happened in Mussolini in June 1943, when eventually the Fallschirmjäger managed to release Mussolini and Italian special forces in October 1943? Now, this is the point. Is this the same? I don't think it is, because the Romans were happy for this woman to remain in charge. They didn't begrudge sending soldiers to help Cartimandua. So it's nothing like Mussolini in 1943. It's nothing like that at all, right? The Romans wanted her there, whether they needed their support or not. Do you need our support, Cartimandua? No, you don't. Okay, we'll just bugger off back to Lincoln. When you need us, just send us back in again. This is what it sounds like, not what happened to Mussolini, where Adolf Hitler wanted Mussolini there to keep control of Italy. That was great, right? But it was nothing like that at all. It was something very, very different. Go on, Anne, say your bit, and I'll do my bit then.
No, it's all right. I was just thinking it might have been like, no, I was gonna, they're saying that lots of it could be displacement, where they're treating one well, but the other one they're taking it out on her, sort of thing,
Yeah, but you can say that, Anne, which is a very, very good point. But there is something quite not right with what you've just said and the whole thing, because obviously the rebellion the rebellion of Boudicca, she remained in charge. Well, her husband Prasutagus and Boudicca remained in charge of the territory, roughly up until the rebellion, right? And then obviously the Romans were okay with that, but then she rebelled, right? So in other words, the Iceni were there, friends, and they had Roman military support and stuff. Everything was fine, right? The Romans were doing the same with Cartimandua. How do they know that Cartimandua wouldn't have done the same thing?
Yeah.
Surely, Anne, to be safe, right? What we need to do, we need to get rid of Cartimandua, and they didn't. He remained in charge for another 8 years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, to be honest with you, if I'm a Roman general, right, and I'm only used to dealing with men, right, I wouldn't have trusted a woman either, right? I just wouldn't have. There's no way I would have, right? After what happened, bloody hell, Anne, right? Boudicca nearly defeated the Roman military in Britain. She nearly did it, right?
Yeah.
We don't want Cartimandua doing the same thing. But Cartimandua, they trusted her, completely trusted her, right? Which is quite weird. The Romans, for example, what we've got, the Teutoburg Forest in AD 9, and you've really set me off now. I could just go on all bloody night. The Teutoburg Forest in AD 9, right? What we've got is Varus's legions being led into the forest of Teutoburg, right? And the legion, the Romans trusted, the Romans actually trusted their allies, but the Romans were wiped out. Yeah. This was 9 AD, Anne, right? This was apparently Tiberius went to his death looking for his legions. Emperor Tiberius, where's my legions gone? Where have they gone? He would be saying, muttering down the corridor, right? The Romans were stressed about this happening again. They didn't trust these people, but they trusted Cartimandua. What has she got over the Romans? This is the important point. There's a very important point.
No,
So
I
anyway,
agree.
so let's just talk about what basically this is in full what Tacitus said about Venetius. Let's have an image of Venetius on you, because we don't really to be honest with you, we don't really know much about Venetius, because history is written about women at this time in Britain, not the man. Work that one out. It's not the same, really, but yeah, there we go. It's a great bit of history where women are the ones who are the ones that people write about. Then Tacitus is not really writing about this guy, but he writes a little bit. Here we go. She grew to despise her husband Venetius. This is run up to AD 51, and took as her consort his squire Velicatus, whom she admitted to share the throne with her. Basically, she said, "Look, Venetius, bugger off, right? I'm taking this guy." And Venetius couldn't do anything about it, because she was the one. This is like the 1940s or 50s. Women didn't have a say whether they could get divorced or not, right? It was a really difficult process, right? That's what we're going to compare it with. But back then, women would basically said, "Right, I'm divorcing you. That's it."
Yeah.
Her house was at once shaken by this scandalous act. Remember, she was of royal blood, right? Like Boudica, her husband was favoured by the sentiments of all the citizens. This is what Tacitus wrote. The adulterer. My God, he's going to say that. He's going to say that about this absolute bitch. You know, this. Let's use some terms. Tacitus is referring to this woman as a slut, right? As an adulterer. This is somebody who's abhorrent to the ideas of Rome. But Tacitus is writing about this, right? This woman doing this. How has this woman got the right to smite this great leader Venetius? The adulterer was supported by the queen's passion for him and by her savage spirit. So Venetius calling in aid from outside, and at the same time assisted by a revolt of the Brigantes. This is now AD 57. Put Cartimandua into an extremely dangerous position. Then she asked the Romans for protection, and in fact, some companies of our foot and horse, after meeting with indifferent success in a number of engagements, finally succeeded in rescuing the queen from danger, and the throne was then left over to Cartimandua, whilst Venetius would no longer war against us. Now, very powerful words there. Now, Tacitus refers to Cartimandua leaving her consort of Velicatus as scandalous. He also discusses how Venetius rallies against her, but fails after she secures aid from the Romans. Cartimandua was not so successful in AD 69, when basically Venetius waited like a snake in the grass. He waited, okay, not 18 years, he waited nearly 20 years, right, to take back the throne. Taking advantage of Roman instability during the year of 4 emperors, Venetius staged another revolt again with help from other nations. Cartimandua appealed for troops from the Romans, who were only able to send auxiliaries. Cartimandua was evacuated, leaving Venetius in control of a kingdom at war with Rome. After this, Cartimandua disappears from the sources. Now, again, this is really interesting. What happens is Rome loses control of the province for a short time, right? Rome is not in control of the province. They lose control of the province, right? And the point is, when Rome loses control of the province, this is when Venetius basically says, you know, what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to take control. I'm going to take full opportunity, right? To um, to see my destiny, but it didn't last long. And the reason why it didn't last long was because Rome reorganized themselves. They got the legions together. They defeated the Brigantes, and it's likely that many of the Brigantes were put unto the sword.
Ah,
Right.
mm,
So this is a very, very important thing that's happening. So in other words, there's a point to be made here, and before we have a break, Venetius rebelled against Rome in AD 69, kicking out his ex-wife, Cartimandua, right? He
mm.
lasted basically a year.
Oh,
The same thing would have happened to Cartimandua um, if she had rebelled against Rome in AD 43, AD 51, AD 57. She wouldn't have lasted any time at all, right? So by waiting out, she managed to save she managed to save her kingdom from what happened to uh, Boadicea, right? But then again, she was wise to know that before this stuff happened with Boadicea, because the Boadicean revolt didn't occur until AD 61, right?
mhm,
Um,
right.
she was already wise to what was going on with the Romans in AD 51, right? So she had already decided not to war against Rome. She wasn't going to see what was going to happen to Boudica, right? Because that was going to happen 10 years later. She was so wise as a woman to know not to war against Rome, to save her people's sovereignty. And she saved her people's sovereignty. She was able to reign over a kingdom whilst the whole of the south was being taken over by Rome. What does that say? The Romans were more interested in capturing Caraticus than anything else. So, right, what we're going to do now, we're gonna take a break. We're going to take a break. It's very dark here because I got to put the lights on. So I'm gonna try and put one of the lights on now, Anne. Because I need to put the lights on. Bloody hell! So Anne, do you want to say something while I try and find my light?
I'm just, you could see, I mean, obviously the dating of everything is very important. You've got to look at the process, of how they operated in Britain,
Yeah.
how the Romans operated. And I think, yeah, I mean, she was very wise. But I think, didn't you say though that they weren't a warring people really, the Romans.
Hang on a minute. Hang on. Say that again. Did you say the Romans weren't a warring people?
No, yeah, I thought. I mean, compared to
They
the other,
were a warring people, right? But
yeah,
no, hang on a minute. They were a warring people in the sense that if you resisted them, they would war against you. If you
yeah,
didn't resist,
yeah,
then you have the Roman Pax, the Roman peace. Keep
yeah,
talking, Anne. Go on.
yeah. So they must have had some episodes like in the forest, when they were defeated, and various other little skirmishes they did. So she's been watching them. She's
But
been
but the thing is, did she know anything about Teutoburg Forest? Because naturally, the Teutoburg Forest was 40 years earlier, and also the Teutoburg Forest itself was in another country. So it's like,
Hmm.
did she need to know? There weren't newspapers around that time. This was Northern England. Was Germany relevant to Northern England? There's
Oh,
all those questions.
yeah. No, there was the first time when they were in not it was Peterborough area, wasn't it? That the Romans were defeated that was quite early on. She
No,
might
what are you on about, Anne? The Peterborough. What? Hang on. No, 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 Anne. What we talking about?
I'm talking about, when they were surrounded by
Oh, right, yeah. But basically, no, actually, the Ninth Legion was a little bit further south, and they were surrounded and wiped out by Boudicca. Yeah, that's right. Half of the Ninth Legion.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, well, she's got knowledge, of their history and their activity. She must have some sort of respect for them, the Romans.
But the main thing was whether the Romans actually had respect for her, and this is why she remained in charge.
Yeah, because she kept quiet. I don't know. She didn't retaliate, or stir them up. She was
Exactly.
probably
Exactly.
quite passive,
Exactly.
quite passive, and so that suited them. They didn't want anybody, who was going to cause trouble. They just wanted to
but they
control.
needed the territory, and they didn't do anything with it. Anyway, Anne, thanks for that. What we're going to do, Henry? Anything you want to say?
He's got to sleep.
No, I'm going to sleep. No, I thought that was very enlightening. It's a subject area I don't have an awful lot of knowledge of, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And the next bit comes from another historian, sort of agrees with most of what I said, but she's got another take on it. So we'll do that after the break. Pat, and hope. Oh yeah, it's 8:25, so I need to go outside to make sure all the animals are safe, and then we'll have a 15-minute break, and that's it. Anything from you, Pat?
No, ditto what Henry said. And I don't know why I went all blurry. There we are.
You have gone all blurry, exactly.
Anyhow, thank you.
Anything from you, Goff?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we know about that time comes from Tacitus, doesn't it? And he's a bit biased, wasn't he, in a lot of what he wrote. So we can't really say we know what they were thinking. It's difficult to interpret, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. And what was I gonna say? I think the thing that I missed out completely was that after AD 69 she didn't die, right? We don't know what happened to her, and it's like I explained this last night that we probably don't know what happened to her, as the Romans weren't interested in the foggiest, right? Tacitus wasn't interested what happened to this woman. She's now gone. My God, we don't have to write about a woman. Thank goodness for that. Right, we've now got Boudicca has now gone out of history, and Cartimandua is out of history. We don't have to write about it again. But the Romans saved her, but we don't know what happened to her.
Because it is true. We're more interested in Caraticus.
Yeah.
Because he went to Rome, didn't he? Was he a prisoner? He'd be able.
Caraticus went to Rome, but that's obviously another story altogether. So
enlightening.
And basically Black Patch's dog in online that he hasn't been on for a while. Just basically mentioning, here we go, she was a client queen, the same as Boudicca's husband was a client king. But then again, this is the point. That is exactly the point. The title queen, and this is what I've been saying, that this title queen, and obviously Boudica, and they're the same level, and the way they've been treated, and I think this is absolutely fascinating stuff. So what we'll do, it's 8:28 now. I got to pop outside quickly. We'll have a 15-minute break. So Anne, do the entertainment whilst I'm out. And we'll be back at
hello to Pat.
well, you two could talk.
Yes,
you two talk then. Goff is going to let you talk, and he's going to go out the room and get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I'll probably have a cup of coffee too. But
how's your arm?
Oh, it's getting better. It's getting stronger.
Good.
I still can't pick anything. I can't do much with it. Like, pick anything up. It's not strong, but I can
move around. Yeah.
just Well, it's difficult to tell because I've got this plaster on. I feel as though I'm going like that, but I could be. I don't know. I've got 2 more weeks to wait yet before I get the plaster off. So, and then it'll be physiotherapy.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's I've been a bit. Yeah, it's been a bit weird this week. Yeah, Joe's not playing bowls now, so it's like it's only a period of time between the indoor and the outdoor, but I just find it difficult to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to the opticians tomorrow, but he's coming with me, so I would have said you could meet for coffee, but I don't know. Just
Just hang in there.
having any visitors?
Yeah. A week from today. Yeah. 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 My
You
God.
having visitors for Easter?
Yeah. No, well, yeah, I'm having 2 grandchildren Saturday night,
Oh, right.
so that parents can go
Right.
out, you know.
Oh, well.
Well, I gotta bake a birthday cake because he's 41, my son.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's only a year younger than Mari.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's 42 this year.
Yeah.
What is she? 1983.
Ah, 84 he was.
September 83.
Yeah, he was.
And he went to, oh, I don't know whether people can hear this, do you?
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
Hmm?
They can hear it.
Oh, let's go and have a coffee then.
Okay. Right. Bye.
Bye.
Neolithic package.
I did make a mistake. I think I should have nothing for now, so I can just click forward. Oh. Ah. I don't know where I am. Oh, it's probably gonna.
Okay.
Oh,
I gotta go back to my class. Okay. Oh, I will. I will. Okay.
Okay.
You take care.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. All right. Bye now.
Bye, then.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
hi.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
Who's that?
Oh, that was Bethan. She calls every night.
Oh,
Oh dear. I don't know why this camera. Now I'm in focus.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, it's funny. Oh dear. Anyhow. Well, so we're going to go into the Romans now, huh? It's at the end of the Iron Age?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we
Well,
did.
no, we don't really know that much.
No.
Um,
Well, my husband thinks, the Romans is much more history rather than archaeology.
well, it is because well, I suppose it's debatable, isn't it? Because they used to call it prehistory when,
Yeah.
we think of prehistory for archaeology, but yeah. But there's so much more archaeology in Europe,
Yeah.
prehistory.
Oh, yeah.
And when it comes to just our country, it is history. Yeah, it is history because that's modern history.
We got
From
Stonehenge and a few things.
Mhm.
We have Stonehenge and the Orkneys. That's pretty prehistory.
Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, your husband's probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell him it's a combination,
But I don't really, I always hated the Romans.
Yeah.
All those films, persecuting the Christians.
Oh, dear. Yes.
That's probably the only history I knew. I don't know what I learned at school. It was like,
And did you have sex education at school?
no,
Well, that's well, yeah.
what's that got to do with the Romans?
Well, I don't know. It must be something to do with the Romans, isn't it?
Nah. Oh, yeah. According to you, yeah.
That's my best bloody lecture on YouTube. It's at 75,000 views. Roman porn. Goff was in on that lecture and I recorded it.
No, I know.
It was all in the title.
In fact, that was one of the best lectures I ever did in Lantern Major. Well, actually, after the lecture, I had to send all the images of the lecture over to Goff to make sure that they were appropriate.
Oh, and he said yes, did he?
Yeah.
It was very successful, wasn't it?
Now, was it? The room was packed.
It was. Yeah. Standing room only, if you excuse the expression.
Yeah.
I think there was that horrible bloke in there called Jim, so that spoiled it.
Your arch enemy.
Is he still alive? Because I haven't heard from him for a while.
I haven't heard anything about him, no. I haven't seen him. I haven't seen anybody. You haven't seen Lynn and Chris for ages. So, oh.
Oh, Pat and I are going to go down and see Carl's roundhouse, aren't we, Pat? We're going to have a trip.
Get the gumption up.
Organize a trip.
Well, you'll have to get down here soon before the storms blow it over. We got another really bad storm coming.
I know. No, I'm not coming down in a storm. It's too late now. It's too late.
But I'm not saying you do it tonight, love.
No. No, I gotta wait till my arm's fixed.
What's that got to do with it? What's that got to do with salt?
Well, I can't hold a knife and fork yet.
Oh,
So
I
what?
can hold a fork. My dad cut my dinner up. My husband's got to cut my dinner up.
oh.
Why didn't you just have soup?
Well, yeah, he'd have to make that. He's not into soup. Oh, squash. He does. There's nice squash soup. He used to, but it's gone off the menu.
Oh.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Anyway, let's get on with part 2. Some of us have got to get to bed by whatever.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, hurry up.
yeah. So
What I
I'm.
do is I stick my fork in something like a
Oh.
chop or something, and I just eat round it.
Why didn't you just suck things, Anne? Oh,
Yeah.
no.
All right, then go on, carry on.
You know what they used to say, Anne? Suck it and see.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Actually, we had all these. Oh yeah, we got to do this in a minute, and obviously that's a little quote from the earlier part of the lecture, and we got all that there. So let's get on to part 2, and we'll start off with this. So we are now at part 2 of this wonderful presentation today about Cartimandua. And I've just got to write something down here to get this in, and I just got to do that, and there we go. Oh yeah, I'm in Barry on Friday, but obviously you can't get to Barry, can you, Anne? So don't worry about it. I'll see you again, Anne. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, let me get my notes up here. I'm trying to get my notes online, and right. Okay. Where are we? Hang on a minute. Right, hang on a minute.
Money due.
What's that?
When's the money due?
Oh, the money's due next week.
Oh.
I've got a little technical problem. Minute, if you can bear with me. And tell us about the cricket results a minute.
Oh, there's been some good programs on about
Cricket.
not cricket. No, I thought it was going to be cricket, but Australian football. There was something on last night about Aborigines and Aborigine.
Oh yeah, you're obsessed with your abos, aren't you? Right.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah.
anyway, I've got it now.
Go
So
on then.
yeah, hang on. I'm bloody talking. You can interrupt Goff, but you can't interrupt me. All right, that's it. Right. Now, this is from the author of the book, which we're going to look at now. She gives us a little bit of an introduction. So Jill Armitage, the book came out in 2020, so it's actually quite new. And what we're going to look at now is why has history overlooked Cartimandua, which is basically what we've been thinking about all evening. This is about the book. It says Jill Armitage cuts through the tangled politics of the 1500s. Now that's basically they tried to link her with Queen Elizabeth I, but this one was very, very different. To create an inclusive, clear narrative, and engaging and knowledgeable read, Celtic Queen. So if you want to get, I would thoroughly recommend the book. Anyway, so
Fiction.
no, it's not fiction.
Oh, all right.
No, the point is what I was trying to say earlier on. The Tacitus stuff. We're too reliant upon the Tacitus stuff, and
Yeah.
I know some of you were talking about Rome and the Iron Age stuff earlier on, and what
It needs to be
Pat's
debated.
husband said. But the point is, I made the point that there was a period from AD 43 all the way through to AD 69 where the territory of the Brigantes was absent of the Romans, right? And that's the point. That's what we see in the archaeology. That is what the archaeology tells us. When we look over to the eastern part of the country, there's loads of stuff going on in the archaeology, even the likes of Londinium, big thick layer of black stuff that's being burnt down to the ground. And you might look at Wales, for example, abandoned bank and ditched enclosure hill fort. So that's going on, and new places like Caerleon being constructed. There's a lot going on, but this is not going on in the territory of the Brigantes. So if we didn't have the history, right, if we didn't have the history, we would know that there's something happening, right? And it's quite likely we'd think it's to do with a woman, because women were the rulers at that time. And it's anyway, so why has history overlooked Cartimandua? Now let's go to oh god, but why have we got Baldric on you? Hang on a minute. It's gone wrong. It's gone wrong. It's gone. Hang on a minute. Here we go. There. Now, what I wanted was to get to here, I think. That'll do. So, mention the name Cartimandua and people look blank. Yet Cartimandua is the first documented queen to have ruled part of Britain in her own right. Now, I had this discussion on Tuesday. I sort of discussed it out of my head and let people know what I thought. Now, this woman is quite stridently a queen, right? She's respected. And when you look deeply in this, there's a coin that was eventually issued in Roman Britain, which has the word Britannia on it and a figure of Britannia. You know, that figure that we still have on some of our coins being issued today. And I think that word Britannia comes from the word Brigantes, and I do believe that the figure on that coin might actually illustrate Cartimandua. Who else is it going to illustrate? It's not going to be that damnable witch Boudica, right? So why not have Cartimandua? Now, she was queen of the great Brigante tribe, whose land, according to the geographer Ptolemy in the 100s, extended to both seas. You're looking at that east to west. It's quite a big area, and reached as far north as Biron and Dumfriesshire, and as far south as the River Trent in South Derbyshire. And even there, it's actually going beyond that. It's going all the way to the Chester as well. It's a big area. And again, why was she allowed to keep control of this area? This is the very, very important point. Why is she still in control? So let's just try and move images along. Again, another one of this area, playing something else. Now, Cartimandua is largely unknown, although tonight I think we've given quite a bit of information on it. As figures go, you know more about Cartimandua than maybe you know about Boudica until we do the discussion about Boudica. Yet she was a central player in the drama of Roman annexation of Britain. And when we think about this kingdom, this very, very large kingdom, if it's one of the 33 tribal kingdoms of Britain, this is a really big kingdom. And if this is mentioned by the Romans as being one of those kingdoms that laid tribute to Rome, and one of the kings, all this is very important. So when we think about this, this, however, was a time of immense change, the merging of the old and new worlds and the new millennium. Maybe what could have happened is Cartimandua reigned for another 10 years. Would the Romans have gone north? Maybe they wouldn't have. The problem is Rome could not keep 3 to 4 legions in Britain, right? It couldn't keep that number of troops in Britain indefinitely. Britain was a drain on Roman military resources, and they needed to let the local people take over and do their own thing. And actually, Cartimandua was doing it for them. She was probably paying taxes. She was probably doing things. Everything was working fine, and it was working fine for the Romans until AD 69. Again, there's a woman in charge. In AD 43, Roman general Publius Ostorius Scapula, with Emperor Claudius and half a dozen elephants and several carts full of statues of Lloyd George, invaded Britain and called the natives Celts, after the word Keltoi meaning barbarian. We are barbarians to the Romans.
Yeah.
The Celts were not necessarily barbarians. They were inestimably brave and had a reputation as ferocious warriors. And so did the Germanic people as well. So did the Gauls. But we're the ones who are standing out against Rome at this stage, painting themselves with blue dye called woad and hurling themselves without fear into the conflict. That may be all nice and the type of thing that historians would write about, and this wonderful author of this book, our friend Jill Armitage, says that, but I'm not really enamored with using those terms because Cartimandua and the warriors are not like that. They're not doing the fighting, and they're not chucking themselves into battle, right? If and when you think about Boudica, right? Boudica's soldiers ain't painted in blue dye called woad either, right? So it's one of those things, right? You either believe it or you don't. I'm not really into this thing about the blue woad thing, but we'll talk about it in the future. Now, this Jill Armitage says something really interesting. And am I going to agree with this? I'm not, because she says what they lacked in military skill, they lacked military skill. They made up for their bloodthirsty ferocity, but sadly, the Celts were no match for the well-disciplined Roman army. I would disagree with that because Boudica defeated a Roman army initially, and she captured 3 huge cities, right? I would disagree with that. And if Boudica had managed to maybe do something different at the Battle of Watling Street when Suetonius Paulinus has got one single legion, right, against her 40,000 warriors or 100,000 warriors, or in some text, 1,000,000 warriors, which is totally crap. But the fact of the matter is, if she managed to do something different, right, with 40,000 warriors, or maybe less than that against the Romans, maybe she would have won the day. But that's history, right? But that all said, we're talking about Cartimandua, not Boudica, right? Cartimandua and her elders watched and waited as the Roman legions invaded the south. She called together other tribal leaders, and they debated whether to unite and go south to fight or wait. They did not go south and fight or wait. They saw, and Anne made this point earlier on, and maybe she could have done it in a different way, right? The people of Kent were naturally defeated. The Cantiaci people of Kent were naturally defeated by the Roman legions, naturally, because they're facing 4 Roman legions, which is the equivalent of 6,000 men per legion, plus their auxiliaries, plus everything else. This is the one thing when people talk about Roman legions and they've got a strength of 6,000, that's not exactly true, because usually they leave about 1,000 men back in their depot. 5,000 men are actually fighting, a bit like the British Army. Not everybody goes to war, that type of thing. But anyway, cracking on. So the point is the Catavalani tribe of the south, and that you're talking about Caraticus. These people would be eventually defeated by Rome, and the people of the north said, we're not doing that. However, the people of the east and the west were still thinking, the Rome is not our friend. But the point is that this Cartimandua is a different take on this. So the Roman authorities believed in their right by might. Now, I think this goes back to another point that Anne made. I think it was a bit confusing, but I think what Anne was trying to say, that if people didn't resist, then it was a peaceful thing. If people resisted, then it was a bloodbath, right? Romans believed in Pax Romana because the Romans, needed you, right? And when the Roman legions are invading Britain, if you're having to feed 30 to 40,000 men, right, that's no small deal, right? You need food, right? And unless you've got enemy areas that are not friendly towards you, your food is going to run out quite quickly. If you look at my book Romans in South Wales, it sort of talks about Roman rations and what the Romans ate and had every single day. It was quite a really nice diet, even the rations were quite big. So the big question is with this tonight, and I don't really want anybody to discuss this or answer this because we're really not going to get this right. But the tribal lands of defiant tribes who resisted the Romans were scorched. Cartimandua knew that, or did she look at this in a different way? Because if she was anything like Boudicca, she would have thought, right, we're gonna attack the Romans, and we're gonna wipe them out, right? But she was not like Boudicca. She was very logical, right? And why not? She could have thought she could have defeated the Romans. The Romans had been defeated before in history, as Anne pointed out earlier on, but she decided not to. Was she looking to see what the tribes are doing in the south? There was no newspapers. And by the time she would have learned what was going on with the tribes in the south, it would have been too late for her to done anything anyway. People. There wasn't like a Morse code system where oh, we're being attacked in the south, please send your warriors. That didn't exist, right? So we've got to be very careful when people say that these were going to unite together and fight the Romans when they probably didn't know for some time. It may have taken months and months and months for these people to know that the Romans invaded, at which point it would have been too late. Now, what we do see is that we talk about the future Roman general Vespasian, and we think about what was going to happen in West Wales. And then we think about Agricola a little bit later, but that was obviously after the reign of Cartimandua. And, one thing that I've taken, and before I was doing my research on these notes, I may have already understood what Jill Armitage said in her book, right? Before I had read this. Now, this is Stanwyck, right? The title is Averting Bloodshed. Queen Cartimandua looked for signs from the gods, but the gods did not stop the Roman armies advancing north. The sheer number of troops and the splendor of their arms. So what she's facing is this, right? She's facing this. A slight exaggeration, boys and girls, but to be honest with you, the illustrator has managed to get the armor sort of right for once. It's not this big plated silver armor. It's more like combat ready troops, leather and chainmail and that type of thing, right? We're going to take task with this now a minute. When an author says the sheer number of troops and the splendor of their arms and armor as thousands of men marching across the countryside in orderly columns would have been an impressive, though terrifying sight to their enemies, right? The landscape didn't look like this, right? There was boggy areas. There were small, narrow trackways, right? There was agricultural land. It wasn't organized in a way that you could just walk across it, right? So the idea that these people were seeing really thick, chunky columns of men wandering across the landscape is slightly not true, right? They were narrow columns, just like the columns going through Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD. However, no doubt they would have been very, very impressive nevertheless. By AD 47, the Romans and their vast armies were on the very edge of Briganti territory. They'd already passed Lincoln. They had fought their way north, and a new Roman province lay south of the Trent Severn line, its boundary marked by the Fosse Way. Now, again, when an author is saying, I did say that I agree with lots of what she said, but obviously I don't agree with everything, right? When you're saying that the Romans were fighting their way north, right, it's not exactly completely true, right? Now, so what we've got is the Fosse Way. The Fosse Way, the Romans decided that the boundary was going to be there. That was it. They didn't need to go further north. But what the Romans needed to do, they needed to make sure that their supply lines, that their civilization was safe, right? This is a mistake that many military generals make, right? Again, let's talk about the Second World War. You talk about Operation Barbarossa. They went too far. Their supply lines were not good. Things failed, right? With the Germans invading Russia. Look at Alexander the Great, right? Alexander the Great went all the way to India. but his supply lines were basically non-existent, and Alexander the Great couldn't go any further because he had to go home, right? You look at you look at, for example, the supply lines associated with Islandawana and the Zulus defeating one of Chelmsford's columns at Islandawana in January 1879. And you're thinking that you're thinking, well, it's all to do with supply lines. You overextend yourself. You're not really together. You're not really keeping things tight. And the Romans knew this, because if they kept going north, they might not be successful in what they were doing. They needed to make sure that they were in charge. So basically, the Roman armies could have just attacked the Brigantes. They could have just gone in there, right? But they chose not to. This is all about they chose not to. They didn't fear the Brigantes because they had conquered or defeated or made friends with everybody else. They didn't fear them, right? But there was something about Queen Cartimandua that the Romans saw, that this individual was a practical leader. And I think one of the comments that somebody made on online earlier on is that she was like a client queen, but I'm not really sure I think that way. I think that she was, I'm not a quiet client queen. I'm ruling, right? You can like it or not, but I'm staying put. And the Romans like that, right? So rather than fighting the invading forces, she negotiated to preserve her people's tribal independence without bloodshed. And I think we've got around the houses here. How she did that is not really something that we can think about. You know, not something that we can completely understand. But again, if you think about this area, she was in complete control of Lancashire, Cumberland, Yorkshire, big chunks of Derbyshire, even all the way down to the Roman fort at Diva, Chester. And when you think about it, the 20th Valley of Beatrix establishing their fort at Diva, right? Chester, right? My God, there's this bloody woman. She's on our border. You know, she could attack at any time. The Romans didn't think that way. And when it's all these little areas where it's got Ribchester and Eberacum, York, and it's got Corbridge and so on, right, along the area of the likes of Hadrian's Wall, right, they weren't established until after AD 69. So Cartimandua collaborated, and she was allowed to administer her domain. She probably provided food for the Roman military. She probably provided gold for the Roman military, which then paid the soldiers. So in other words, you stay there, you supply us with food, you supply us with the money to feed our men, and you can do exactly what you want, and that's what's going to happen. But can it be as simple as that? You know, I'm really, you know, trying to make it too over simple, right? Or am I? Or is it that simple? You know, is it what's going on, right? And Cartimandua may have actually provided soldiers for the Roman army. Think about that. And the Romans are then, after AD 47, helping her out whenever she needed any help. So it's a two-way exchange. It's not all in one camp. So, talking about Pax Romana, so again, what was key was Caraticus. It became a practical Claudian policy, Emperor Claudian policy, to have pro-Roman kingdoms flanking its boundaries. But sadly, not everyone agreed with Cartimandua's compromise, and the greatest anti-Roman hostility for Cartimandua came from her husband, Venetius. Venetius didn't agree with her husband. Venetius didn't agree with his wife, right? You know, he wanted to fight the Romans, and Cartimandua was saying no, 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 no. But this would only happen after there was an internal fight within the territory against Cartimandua and Venetius, roughly around 47, 48 AD. At this stage, Venetius was going along with what his wife wanted, but obviously all this changed, as I've said, after AD 51. Her loyalty to Rome was tested to the full when, in AD 51, Caraticus, the former leader of the Catavilani tribe, fled into Brigantia. Again, it sounds very similar to Britannia, doesn't it? Seeking political asylum after military defeat by the Romans. Unlike Cartimandua, Caraticus had chosen to fight the Romans, but fearing for her safety of her people, Cartimandua handed over to the Romans Caraticus. Her enemies considered this as an act of treachery, or did they? This is the point. If they thought, because she still remained in power for nearly 20 years, right? It was only when Rome was weak in AD 69 that she actually lost control. The Romans bestowed a great wealth upon her for handing over Caraticus, right? Then that's another point. The Romans gave her wealth. It's not the other way around. Even though she's being taxed, the Romans are saying, "Oh, bloody, give all the money back to her that she's, we want Caraticus," which makes sure that Claudia, the Emperor Claudius, is going to become a god because he's done what Julius Caesar did. Julius Caesar captured Vercingetorix. He had by fault captured Caraticus. Right, and the whole thing with this, I know I'm repeating things, but I'm just trying to get us to know what's going on. And there's lots to be said. According to the Roman writer Tacitus, Cartimandua lost her husband, but preserved her kingdom. Well, she didn't want a husband anyway, did she? She wanted to be free and to keep her people free. So a point that I haven't made, and there she is again, a point that I haven't made. Throughout the 50s and the 60s, the Roman legions were hovering on the borders of Brigantia, poised for intervention in support of Cartimandua. So, in other words, Cartimandua kept control of her world, right, until things collapsed with the Roman world for a little bit. It's the year of the four emperors. And the reason why it's the year of the four emperors, Emperor Nero is assassinated, right? So 4 emperors come into, and eventually the ex-Roman general, Vespasian, reigns as emperor for 10 years. And it's a peaceful time over Rome. The Roman writers had a field day and her reputation suffered. Now, being able to make slights over a woman like this is very, very important. And so this whole thing that in AD 69, Cartimandua is removed by her ex-husband, right? And basically what happened is Venetius managed to seize the entire territory of the Brigantes, right? He was bitterly anti-Roman. It was only then that the Romans made the decision to invade, conquer, and absorb Brigantia. So this is the point. You can see at the end of the chapter, right? These people invade a kingdom that is purely anti-Roman, right? Because they were pro-Roman, they didn't want to invade, right? But they didn't do the same with Boudica. It's back to Boudica again. It really, really is. So despite all of Cartimandua's efforts, Brigantia became part of the vast Roman Empire, and the armies went on to conquer the north as far as the Scottish Highlands. And actually, we know they got all the way to John O'Groats. So, I was just about to say Land's End. Wrong part of the country. So sadly, the courageous queen of the Brigantes, who had faced the Roman invasion with such determination, has not found a rightful place in our history books. And she should. And at the end, what we're going to do, we're going to read an extract from this book, which is actually there. Okay, can we just read that? Okay, here we go. This is Jill Armitage's book, 2020, out in January 2020. Celtic Queen, The World of Cartimandua follows the life of Cartimandua through contemporary writers and examines archaeological evidence and Celtic finds. It locates the hill forts that would have been Cartimandua's headquarters. It gives many references to popular Celtic culture, living conditions, their gods, beliefs, art, and symbolism, presenting an intriguing insight into the life of this fascinating woman and the Celtic Roman world in which she lived. And then the last bit is there. Jill Armitage is an English photojournalist who has written numerous historical books, and that's her book. And Celtic Queen, The World of Cartimandua, and was out on the 15th of January 2020. And just anyone interested, I would go and get that book, get it from Amazon or whatever, and you might be able to find a little bit more than what I've told you tonight. Do you know what? I'm a bit worn out now. It's all that talking you do, Anne.
I wonder if she's married to Neil Armstrong. Oh, no.
What?
I didn't mean to say that.
Shut up! Hang on, isn't Neil Armstrong dead now?
I was thinking of the poet Armitage, isn't it? Not Armstrong. Armitage.
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
it's Armitage, not Armstrong.
Have you heard of Armitage?
Well, I've just told you about the bloody woman.
No,
No, I haven't heard of a poet called Armitage. And what do you want to tell us, love?
Oh no, I mean it's interesting. It's interesting to hear all these different bits of information, and I wonder if yeah, maybe I will get her a book.
Good.
It's women's power, isn't it? And after all, she was a woman.
No, blooming hell! What? After
Gender identity? No.
you should be doing politics, Anne. Right? I know it. I know they've decided in Europe that a man is a man and a woman's a woman, but that's life. Anyway, anything else you want to say, Anne?
Britain today. Yeah.
What?
And in Britain today.
Where?
On the news. Sex.
Anne, I don't care.
Oh,
right. That's fine. That's fine. Henry,
it's quite important.
Yes, but we're not supposed to be doing politics. We're not doing politics. End of.
I know, but at the end of the day, we're talking about women in the Iron Age, and then all of a sudden, women are no longer important.
They are.
No,
shut up.
they weren't after the Iron Age. After the
Oh, right, I see what you mean. Oh God, right, Anne. Right, yeah, that's good. You're killing me, Anne. You're killing me. I'm going to die on this one. Right, okay. By the way, the dodgy git said, did she have a certificate? I don't know what in. Right. So, Henry, anything you want to say?
No, that was, but actually, it was very enlightening.
Good. Well, thanks for that. And I did tell them earlier on you were in the Galapagos Islands or St. Kitts. We couldn't decide which one.
Did St. Kitts already.
Oh, right, all right then. But you haven't done the Galapagos yet?
No,
Hang on.
Antigua.
Hang on. I'm sure you said you were going to go to the Galapagos.
That comes later.
What about Puerto Rico?
Anne, shut up. Right, Pat.
Right. I've got to go, so I'm going to say thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pat.
You okay?
Good to see you. See you soon.
So Pat, she's gone. Right, okay then. Goff, give us some sense at the end of this. And Anne's only allowed to interrupt you once. Go on, Goff.
Now, thanks for bringing this. That was me a very pleasant break from the usual lectures. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good, good, good. I'm glad you thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad you did. We haven't totally finished the Iron Age, but we're coming to the end very soon. So, and we've got to do Boudica and various other things, and we'll try and put everything into sequence when we get there. The first thing that we're going to hear is Julius Caesar and a few elephants, but not yet. If you've got nothing else to say, Goff, it'll be good to see you next week. And if you've got nothing else to say, and Henry's got nothing else to say, it's been a delight. And no doubt, thank you very much for joining us. I will see you all next week. Okay, Goff, Dan, and Henry. Night night.
Bye.
Night night, guys. Night night. Night night.
Just so you know, you won't see me next week.
Yeah, because you're trying to get to the Galapagos Island. Don't go on a rubber dinghy, okay? They'll think you're invading or something. In fact, don't. That's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna fly over to France, right? Ditch my passport in the sea, right? And I'll be put up in a wonderful hotel, and I'll be given a new mobile phone, right? It'll be great.
You just enjoy yourself there. It's full of French people.
No, I'm not going then. Forget it. That's why I want to come back to Britain.
Well, that's why I'm leaving. Right.
I'm confused. Anyway,
Oh.
I'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Have a nice time, and I'll look forward to seeing you when you get back. Take care.
Yeah, it'll be a couple of weeks.
And thanks for the shekels. Night
Yeah,
night.
no problem.
Night night, my friend. Night night. Bye. Bye bye. Right. Okay. And anyway, thanks for people watching online. Thanks for your support there. It's really good to have you online. And Plague Victim Beach. Okay, Pat. Thank you. Bless. She didn't even say good night, did she? Which is a bit of a shame. Who's got certificates in the law? Rubbish. More females in schools and social services. I don't know what that's about. Right. Anyway, that we're gonna call it a day. I'm gonna have a lie down in a dark room. Right. I'm looking forward to coming to Barry on Friday. I've got some filming to do, so that'll be great. So that'll be absolutely brilliant. And getting back to see the old town. There you go. Other than that, I'm gonna be I've got a busy day tomorrow here. I've got to feed the sheep a new type of food because I've got to fatten them up because they're looking a bit thin. And we've got lambs gonna have some more lambs next year. So there you go. Other than that, I'm gonna call it a day. So nostalgia, gwalachieto, folks, and let's look in the chat box. Loading, nothing in the chat. Oh, is there anything in the chat box there? No, nothing in the chat box there. I can do some stew now as well. Nothing in the chat box there. Potatoes. Nothing there. And nothing on that window. Like and subscribe. Nothing in that window. Nothing in that window. And nothing there. Nothing in that window. And let's do nothing there. Nothing there. Nothing in that window. Nothing in that window. Nothing there. Nothing there. Nothing there. Nothing there. Nostalgia, gwalachieto.